Will the real enemies of democracy please stand up? Now, I say this because we keep seeing from various figures on the left and also from the never-Trumpers the idea that Republicans or the Republican Party today poses some kind of a grave threat to democracy. I just saw this from Max Boot. I call him Max Jack Boot. But he goes, if the current trends hold up, Republicans are likely to take over at least the House and quite possibly the Senate, too, along with many state offices. And then he says, this is how democracies die, both at home and abroad. Now, think of the oddity of that statement, and apparently the irony of it is kind of missed by Max Boot. He wants to protect democracy. And what is he saying? That democratically, Republicans are going to win the House. In other words, they're going to win the House not because they took it over by some kind of military occupation or storm. They're going to be elected by the people and take over the people's house, the House of Representatives. And similarly, by winning in state by state by state, they're going to take over the Senate and many other state offices. In other words, the democratic process itself is going to deliver to Republicans control of the legislative arm of the U.S. government. And then this is how democracies die. So how can a democracy die by the very exercise of democracy? Well, it turns out that this view of Max Boot is not unique to him. We see it from Liz Cheney. We see it from Bill Kristol and so many others. Here is Liz Cheney. She's basically talking about the fact that if Kari Lake and Mark Finchem are elected in Arizona, this is like a blow against democracy. We can't allow this to happen. And she says that there is not much of a graver threat to democracy than these two people. Well, and again, how is this possible? If a majority of Arizonans choose Kari Lake over Katie Hobbs or Mark Finchem over his opponent, isn't that a expression of democracy? Doesn't that reveal democracy working the way it's supposed to? But no, what we have here is this idea that somehow democracy is under attack. Democracy is under attack in the very exercise of democracy. In other words, democracy is delivering anti-democrats into positions of power who presumably will, at some future point, subvert democracy itself. Now, Liz Cheney is one to talk because didn't democracy just deliver a harsh verdict on her? Didn't her own constituents basically send her packing? Didn't they say, we don't want you, we'd rather have somebody else? So apparently, what we have here is the view that's coming from the Democrats and from the never-Trumpers that a democratic outcome that they don't like somehow means the democracy itself is endangered. Another way to put it is that democracy is only secure if their candidates win. Now, that alone is not only, it's a contradictory, but it's a nonsensical view of democracy. It's kind of like saying that the rules of tennis are only valid if I win. If I win the tournament. If I lose the tournament, then obviously the rules of tennis are being rejected by the other side. This is an attack on tennis itself. No, it isn't. You lost the game. So what I'm saying here is that democracy is a set of procedures, a mechanism to allow people to express majority will. And majority will is not unlimited. It has to be constrained within constitutional limits, but that is what democracy means. And we are, after all, a constitutional democracy. Some people say, well, I'd rather think of us as a republic instead of a democracy. Well, we are a republic and we are a democracy under constitutional constraint. We're not a democracy in the sense of ancient democracy, and the founders were very clear about that. But it seems to me the Democrats here are the ones who pose a real threat to democracy, not just because of what they do 2000 Mules style, but also because they have now fallen into this fanatical and extreme rhetoric in which they consider people to be authoritarians for doing nothing more than beating them at the ballot box. In other words, the public anger against Joe Biden and his minions for doing a horrible job, which is now redounding to the benefit of the Republicans. This is nothing more than the natural wave of the democratic process playing itself out. It is customary for the party that is in power to lose seats in the midterm election. If they do a bad job, they're likely to lose more seats. This has happened many times before. So what we're seeing in America, at least in terms of elections, is nothing particularly out of line, out of the ordinary. But nevertheless, Democrats are using the rhetoric of anti-democracy to attack their political opponents who are doing nothing more than competing within democracy, making their case to the American people and evidently persuading them.